Hey everybody, it's Carrie. Thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited to jump into prayer and talk about Jonah. Finally, he prays, right? From the belly of the fish. But these words are tender and deep. And so we are going to delve into that in just a minute. But I have gotten to hear from some of you all about answers to some of the questions that we went through last week, or specifically phrases or scriptures from chapter 1 that you might have read over and over, but they just landed on you in a new way. That is such sweet encouragement to me. So thank you so much for sharing that with me, and please continue to do so. I couldn't be more excited when somebody says, hey, this really landed on me, or I'm struggling with this question. Help me kind of work through that, because that just is us communicating and building that community together. So 2 big things to pull out of chapter 1 before we move on to chapter 2. Number 1, God is not afraid to move you out of your comfort zone. And I am living proof of that. That's why we are here and building this community and going through Jonah together. He sees the big picture. And so it should be sad that he's not afraid. But while we get nervous and we're afraid to move out of our comfort zone, there is something so sweet and so rich just beyond that he can't wait to share with us. The second thing, we can't hide from God. We can't hide things from our heart. We can't physically hide. Jonah tried. He modeled that for us. And the simple truth is, there's no such thing. He is always right there with us, surrounding us, and ready to lead, guide, and direct us in the way that he would have us go. So hopefully you can pull out those 2 things and continue to savor those. As we move on into chapter 2, since we're going to be talking about prayer, I want to open us up in a word of prayer. So join me. Lord, thank you so much for the woman that is on the other side of this camera, Lord, and getting ready to walk through chapter 2 of the book of Jonah. Lord, I just ask a special blessing. Some of these verses are hard. They can stir up tender feelings. We all know what it's like to be at the very bottom of that pit. But we also find rest that you are right there with us. So thank you in advance for what it is that you're going to teach through us this week. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Okay, so chapter 2. Finally, okay, so we left at chapter 1 verse 17. The Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. You remember he had asked the fishermen, or he had fessed up to the fishermen, it's me, I'm running from the Lord, toss me over. And so they did. And but I always found that so interesting that he never prayed. We don't see in these verses. He got on that ship and he went right to a nap. And so he didn't pray that the Lord get him to dry ground. He didn't pray the Lord stop the storm, right? He waited. And then all of a sudden, when he really hit rock bottom in the belly of this fish, now the prayers begin. Gosh, you all, don't you feel like you do the exact same things sometimes? I mean, I know I do. I wait until I've used up all my resources, because I'm a fixer. I'm a Martha girl. I want to fix it. I want to make it better. I want everybody around to be happy about it. But finally, when we hit what we feel like is the lowest of the lows, that's when our conversation with the Lord began, just like Jonah. So chapter 2, verse 1. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From the depths of the grave, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. From the depths of the grave. So at this point, Jonah didn't know if he was going to live. Can you even imagine being in the belly of this giant fish and having been gobbled up, and it's smelly and it's gross? And I mean, I'm sure for Jonah at this point, Nineveh was looking pretty good. He's like, oh, I wish I was on dry ground in Nineveh. That would be much better than where I am. But he was still reaching out. In my distress, I called to the Lord. He had prophesied. He had a great relationship with the Lord. This is why he that's why he picked Jonah. And so he knew, we know where to run. We know where to turn when things get hard. But this is when he really begins to evaluate his steps. Verse 3, you hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents surround me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. Now, this kind of tells me that that fish wasn't right there on the surface. I'm not real sure that was the first thing. I think there was probably some sinking. There was still a storm. It stopped. But even on the surface, if that storm would have stopped, there still would have been undercurrents and that sort of thing happening. And so they swept over him. Can you imagine how frightened he was? There was one year we had gone on vacation, and my husband and son, our son was probably in middle school, maybe early high school. They had been, we were at the beach on vacation, and they went pretty far out, and they were swimming and playing and throwing a ball back and forth or whatever. And all of a sudden I could see some lifeguards heading in their direction from the beach going out. And like my heart sank. Because if you've ever seen something like that, I mean, it is just the most frightening thing. And so sure enough, they had gotten caught in an undercurrent and they were being pushed out. And Greg said he could see that they were getting too far away from the shore. And so they were able to call out and get help, and they brought them back. But that is one of the scariest moments on this family, just in that instant of what could have changed in this great family vacation. And all of a sudden now they're out there. And so as they came back, and they were fine, and everything was well, but it was scary for them too. They could feel below the surface that pull to go away from where it was that they knew they needed to be and where they wanted to get to. You all, we feel that walking around on dry land. Jonah felt that undercurrent, that pull of pulling us away from the Lord and what it is that he wants us to do. The waves and breakers swept over me. He continues on in verse 4. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surround me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. So some of that is again down. So he couldn't, the engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me. It was getting dark. The seaweed was tangled up. He couldn't move freely. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't cry out for help. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. I love that also in the Message. I was as far down as a body can go, and the gates were slamming shut behind me forever. Jonah, at this point, he was in the bottom of the sea. He was gnarled up in seaweed. It was dark. It was deep. He was as far down as a body can go. Have you ever felt that way? I sure have. Even last year, there was a season where I would find myself curling up in a chair, just somehow imagining that I was sitting in the Lord's lap, just needing that daddy there to hold me and to help me feel something. My head wasn't tangled in seaweed, but it was tangled in negative thoughts. It was tangled in heartbreak. It was tangled in grief. at the bottom of the sea where the mountains take root. So, you look at the surface of water and the mountains are huge, but they're all started down very deep. I was as far down as a body could go. So curled up in that chair, like I was just sitting in my daddy's lap saying, Lord, my head is tangled up and I am as far down as a body can go. And I am crying out to you. And then this must be where the fish scooped him up, because he goes on to say, but you brought my life up from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, and my prayer rose to you in your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. So here it is. Jonah had hit rock bottom. He had no idea what was to come next. And right when he thought all had been lost, his prayer rose to the Lord, and the Lord scooped him up. I love verse 8 when it says, those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. So all of the false gods, the frauds, the things that we invest in our lives, they only allow us to walk away from the God who truly loves us. We're giving up God's grace by pushing aside and going our own way and following all of these other things. Worthless idols. Verse 9, but I with a song of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. Thanksgiving. Jonah sang a song of thanksgiving in the very bottom of the sea, moments after he thought, this is it. This is my last breath. The good news is I'll see the Lord, but the bad news is I didn't complete the task given to me. But yet here he is in the belly of this fish, giving thanksgiving to the Lord. He goes on to say, what I have vowed, I will make good. So, have you ever made a deal with the Lord? Lord, if you will make this happen, I will do whatever you want me to do. Lord, if you will save this person, this life experience, this whatever, I will do whatever you want me to do. Gosh, we all have those days where I was curled up in that chair, just crying out to the Lord and just asking, can I just feel something? Lord, if you help me feel better, I will do whatever you want me to do. Lord, if you will heal my heart, I'll do whatever you want me to do. He doesn't barter. He doesn't have to. We know what we're called to do, as does he. So we worship him and we make good on those vows. Jonah had reached out and had said, this is, I promise. And salvation comes from the Lord. Once all of that transpires and he calls out and he is thankful and he feels like, okay, now you have brought me this far. I was at the bottom of the sea, moments from death, and you snatched me up, and now I'm in the belly of this fish. So Lord, now that I'm in the belly of this fish, if you will save me from this, again, I will do whatever it is you want me to do. Then, I love that pivot, I love pivot words. Then God spoke to the fish, and it vomited up Jonah onto the seashore. 3 days, 3 nights. How many times do you think Jonah cried out, made plans, thought about how he could have changed what had just transpired. I'm sure over and over and over. Finally, it's the end of these 3 days and nights. He has recalibrated his heart, and he knows what it is that he's destined to do and how to do it and why he should do it, and is so thankful for being spared that the Lord commanded the fish, and it spit up Jonah onto the seashore. So now's the time. This is where the rubber hits the road, right? Now he's on dry land. So I can't wait to see what happens next. There have been dark days in my life, in your life, that you just feel like you're just barely hanging on. Your head is wrapped with all sorts of issues and heartbreak. But now is the time to really dig into that, lean into those feelings, and remember why it is that you're still here and that you're still so thankful that the Lord brought you through those seasons. You might be in that season right now. Sister, I feel it. And it hurts my heart because I know that some days are just easier than others, some seasons. And there's just those dark days that you just think, I have no idea what to even offer or if I can even facilitate knowing what to pray. There have been afternoons and days and nights in my life that I just sit there and go, Lord, I don't even know anymore. I wish I knew exactly what it is to pray for. And those words simply won't come. But here's what I know for sure. There are people in my circle and in my tribe and in my community. You have people right here that are praying for you during this season. They have the words when you don't. Those intercessory prayers can lead to huge opportunities in your faith with the Lord. So let him continue to do that with you and through you, and just cry out. You don't have to have the words. Jonah shows us some words here, but I'm sure in the time that it took to get from the sea level to the bottom of that pit, those words didn't come freely. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about prayer, about hows, the whys, the what to pray when you don't know what to pray, how to just be quiet in prayer, and get from that surface level of your prayer all the way down, deep, 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 to really be able to talk to the Lord about what is in the innermost corners of your hearts. I can't wait. And I look forward to hearing how these prayers and Jonah's prayer really land on you this week. So, okay, you all have a great rest of your day, and questions will be posted Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I look forward to talking with y'all soon. Okay, y'all have a great day. Talk to you. Bye.